Okay, all right, I'm going to go ahead and get started 1 minute early. We have 45 minutes and the time's going to fly by. This is a really exciting topic, so thank you for being here. And just a real quick intro, make sure you're in the right room. This is the panel, Implementing Methods for Reducing Bit Rates While Retaining Quality. Really, I think an extremely relevant topic for what is going on right now in video. It's just an amazing panel. So without, I guess as they say, further ado, I'll introduce myself, and then I want to give time for each of the panelists to introduce themselves and their companies, and then we're going to launch into, I think, a really, sort of a fireside chat, if you will, and we're inviting you into our living rooms, so this will be good. So my name is Mark Donnigan. I'm with a company by the name of Beamr. For those of you who don't know who we are, we're one of the pioneers, actually, of content adaptive video technology. We acquired a company by the name of Vanguard Video last year, 2016, and we have a line of HEVC encoders, H.264 encoders, bitrate optimizers. So we have a lot of experience in this topic. And with that, Prem, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Prem Bangalai. I work for GoGo, sometimes GoGo Air, GoGo in Flight. It's all the same company. We had a Wi-Fi on the plane company. That's where we started. But with multiple devices being carried, I think there was an interest where people wanted to stream, TV or be it a VOD content. I think that's where the focus was. We already had some hardware installed on the plane, and we took this use case where you could stream to your OTT, and bitrate, is very relevant for us because we don't want to compromise on the quality, but the cost per megabyte you send on the link is very relevant for us, and then we try to balance those two together. So, Samir?
Hi, my name is Samir. I'm Chief Architect at Fandango. A lot of you may know Fandango, obviously, for selling tickets, but they also acquired a company called MGO, which is a TVOD service. We rebranded to Fandango now, and has a ton of video-related projects underway, like movie clips. Fandango also owns Rotten Tomatoes, also owns Flixster, has also expanded into South America as well in both the ticketing and the video space. We were one of the first. A lot of work we've done in the video space. One of the first to do 4K HDR along with Netflix and Amazon in the market space. Also one of the first to do really big prototypes of the Beamr video on optimizing our videos and seeing some of the results around that. At the moment, we're looking at optimizing even further our streams. When somebody pays $15 for a movie, they expect to have the best quality they can get. At the same time, there's a lot of interference going on. There's a lot of device issues, video issues, network bandwidth issues. So we're always trying to find that right compromise. Not really between quality, but more of cost. Just as Prem said, it's about cost at the end of the day. Like how do you make that video delivery more efficient, less costly, and still the consumers have the best possible experience.
Jeremy Morrison. I head up the sales engineering team over at Deluxe. Deluxe is a very large company. We do a lot of creative services. If anyone saw Guardians of the Galaxy this weekend, you've seen some of our work. We also do a lot of technical services, work in HDR and 4K for mastering for digital cinema distribution. We do a lot of localization work for Netflix and iTunes and the studios. I work in what's known as the Deluxe delivery team, which are really technical services for studios and for MVPDs and for OTTs. So we are the group that I'm a part of, for example, aggregates content directly from studios or from cable nets. It compresses that content, and then in certain environments, sometimes we publish it to our own origin for streaming out to consumers. Sometimes we publish it into an MVPD's environment. So For example, Charter is one of our large customers. We aggregate all of their VOD content. We create all of their AVRs, and we publish it into their environment. So they have unique needs when we're going over a closed QAM network. We support customers like Starz, where if everything for Starz OTT app, we're aggregating and compressing and then streaming all of their content. We have a few other OTT players that we do that for as well. So always needs for all of those customers, whether it's on a private network or a public network, to look at how can they continue to compress content, minimize their infrastructure or their operations costs across those environments, and still maintain quality out to customers.
Awesome. Thank you. And just a quick note, Daniel Sanders from Verizon regretfully was double booked, so he's not joining us. He sends his apologies. I want to start with, I think this is just an amazing cross-section. As you were doing your introduction, I was thinking about the user base that each of you represents, and the use cases. So I can't think of, we all know that mobile traffic is growing, mobile is expensive, everybody's head nods, right? But I think, you mentioned the cost of streaming onto an airplane 30,000 feet in the air and doing that at high quality. I can't imagine what the cost differential is. It must be much higher. Meanwhile, you've got, premium transactional VOD, Samir, and then you've got the studios represented, and of course they operate a range of services, right? The Deluxe is supporting. I'd like to start with and whoever wants to take it, and then we'll kind of just we'll bounce this question around. But the question is, from your seat, where each of you sit, describe the challenge and both the need for reducing bit rate but retaining quality, but some of the challenges that come with that. And I'll make give a quick example. One challenge is if you're a studio, right? You're cost sensitive, and yet there's a certain quality bar, that has to be met. So that means certain technologies you could not use, whereas Prem is working under a different set of constraints. So whoever wants to start.
So I'll start with one of the first use cases that Deluxe had for this type of technology is a lot of the box set mastering that we do for Blu-ray discs, where because of using a technology that lets us maintain quality while reducing bit rate on some of the series that we create, we can actually save a disc or two. And you think bits are expensive, publishing an extra disc for box sets is thousands and thousands of dollars on each one of those environments. One of the other, when we look at costs of reducing bit rates, a lot of our customers who are really coming to us saying, okay, is now the time to switch, not for 4K, but even for our HD content to HEVC. And we're starting to help them do that analysis. Okay, here, if you go to HEVC, you're still talking about a limited set of devices. Now you're looking at encoding in AVC and HEVC and all of the storage costs for both of those, as opposed to, if there's a way to maintain at least your HD content in AVC, but do compression such that it's still a single encode that can go across your base, that starts to be, that's very attractive to a lot of our customers, which is why we've been, exploring going down this route.
Yeah, I was going to jump in and say, the quality, obviously, everybody looks at the quality of the movie as you get it, but the cost associated to creating those files, and when you look at specifically on the TVOD side, when you see so much of that, the actual transaction fees back to the studio, obviously, margins are obviously very thin. When you need to support the infrastructure that's behind it, the streaming, the delivery infrastructure, how you received the file, you encoded the file, you packaged the file, you're hosting the file in Origin, and the streaming costs. And then also the multiple times that movie gets streamed over the lifetime, right? So it's not even one time. Movies, like kids' movies, right? They get streamed hundreds of times, right? And so you're really trying to, you're trying to find those pennies where you can really adds up less cost, and that's where you want to become way more efficient. And to do that, we've used a lot of different techniques. We've gone with the pre-configured settings for some movies out of the box, some cool tools like FFmpeg has presets for tuning the movie if it's an animation, if it has grain, and so that was kind of the a very manual static way of setting that kind of additional compression to compress more like animation movies. You can compress a little bit more, things like that. And then we're getting more into the world of more dynamic encoding, and that's what's breaking through at the moment. And I think there's a lot of companies out there in the space moving forward.
Just getting a live content or any streaming content on the plane, there's sort of a challenge where installing new gear on the plane is just so much of a challenge, right? So there's a long lead time when you get that done. But by doing so, the efficiencies are really upfront, where you get the best bang for the buck by making sure you've compressed it to the right format, but just not to the format where you can transport it, but ultimately the end user device has to decode it. That's been a greater challenge, and we do have two products, the VOD and the live TV. Both set two interesting different challenges, because one is a more time-based response, and the other one is efficiency, right? So we got to balance both of them. But by understanding these customer base and the installed device base, and just like Mark was alluding to, like in 2013 or 2014, we saw mobile traffic had taken over any other device, like laptop or tablet for the matter. So along those lines, I think we had a large heterogeneous device mix, and then you had to satisfy all these devices combination. That posed an interesting challenge, and our workflows were different based on different product lines. We had to divide by saying, hey, let's tackle this problem on the VOD side first, and then on the live gear. So by not adding any more equipments, right? So on the plane, when you're flying at 35,000 feet and then 500 miles an hour, you need a remote satellite antenna, which is just tracking the satellite. And also, when you fly out of coverage zone, how do you make sure that with the bit rate, the passengers are having a seamless viewing experience. So those are the challenges which we've tried to tackle, and I think we'll talk more as we progress. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Your VOD, is that content stored on the plane, like on local hard drives?
Yes, it's just as I was alluding. I think we built Wi-Fi on the plane. The gear was already available. We had some storage space in there. What do we do with the storage space? We decided to move content, which is encrypted VOD DRM content, and then a player which is downloadable on the plane. We would enable iTunes or for Google, the Play Store player was available on board the aircraft, and you start streaming movies instantly. So.
Interesting. So my next question, I'm going to start with you, Prem. If we think about ways to implement content adaptive optimization techniques, I think of there's the manual. So that would be, Jeremy, like what Deluxe would do with the Blu-ray title, where there's a human compressionist, highly skilled, able to squeeze out every bit, produce an awesome title. And that works for Blu-ray, but it doesn't work for us in the streaming world, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
So there's that approach, but that I'm assuming all of us in the room, that's not a practical or feasible. There is Samir, you mentioned the category approach, where you say, okay, I have my animation, recipe and action and drama, so on and so forth. And I'm assuming on the encoding side, perhaps GoGo is even applying some of the categorization. But Prem, I'm curious, are you doing anything device specific? And if you are, can you talk about what you're doing, and if you are saying, hey, this device has a different set of characteristics and I can create kind of a different recipe then?
Sure. Device specific, not so much, but broadly, couple categories on the device specific side. One is passengers carrying their own devices like iPad or tablets or their phones for the matter. But the second specific is the seat back. This is the device which is on the back of the seat, right? So they have a different profile. These are little older devices, right? So that's the two challenges which we have. But some of these devices, they have power attached to them, so which is good. So it's not the same problem as you would see of draining power on your passenger carry devices, right? But along those lines of the categorization which you suggested, what we do is we try to use HEVC encoding, and we use something called statistical multiplexing. So we are betting on the fact that not every channel which we send on live TV on the plane is going to have a need for high bandwidth, right? So there's going to be, like, if somebody's watching Sports Center with not a lot of scene changes, there's a sports game happening in a different channel. These channels compete for resources or bandwidth within the allocated capacity to that live TV stream. So that way, you may see adaptive, quality change per channel. But ultimately, I think you don't need so much bit rate when you're watching a Sports Center, because the scenes are not changing. So the StatMux has really helped us in that aspect, and we also try to use HEVC. We don't get into the royalty or the challenge there, because we have only 4,000 nodes so far on the plane. So we don't have that challenge of the cost.
That's right.
So.
Yeah, and we won't talk about the royalty issues of HEVC, but Samir, so what is your approach with categorization and how you're utilizing tools?
Yeah, we started out, we had some ideas around when we were about 4 or 5 years ago, we started out actually creating device-specific profiles, right? And we quickly realized that was way too costly to maintain, and that, as we ended up with, smooth streaming, dash, multiplied by DRM types and fair play, and we just ended up with so much, it just was so costly to create and produce that we dropped it and went with a standard set of layers, basically, that fits everybody. And then, once we got past that, we tried to get a little bit smarter each time. So we had a single set of values that we'd pass into the encoding. And then as we got a little bit smarter, we enabled the operators as we kind of, the files are incoming from the studios, we would apply a preset onto each of these films, and so we would have an operator kind of manually decide, like, hey, this is an animation movie, X, Y, and Z, other parameters we're going to set, and that would kind of make its way out. And we'd also send some information along to the player about what kind of profile is being set, so that we can adapt more aggressively as well as needed.
That's interesting, and Jeremy, kind of a slightly different angle on sort of the same question. So for those that aren't familiar, and I assume most people are familiar with Deluxe, but there's probably some who aren't, because you're often doing the studio services sort of behind
the scenes.
Yeah, behind the scenes, exactly.
And yet that little red circle at the end of each movie.
That's right. That's right.
And yet, stay till the end.
Yeah, when you go see a movie, you're watching Deluxe. When you watch a Blu-ray disc from pretty much any of the major studios, this is Deluxe. So the point in making this point is that you're involved at sort of the epitome, typically, of quality, for whatever the format is. I'm curious because, and so I'm asking a question I already know the answer to, but I want you to tell the audience. Studios are there's golden eyes in studios, and they are, to say they're opinionated is an understatement about where there's quality. So you start talking about bit rate reduction, and you start talking about making files smaller.
Sure. They
don't necessarily welcome you with open arms, right? So how have you, and yet you mentioned Warner Brothers is using even like our technology, so studios are adapting techniques. So what's your experience in how you've gotten some of those folks over the hump, or how they, or even why they've adopted it?
Sure. But the why is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Cost. Cost is number one driver in a lot of this. We deal with 4K source files these days coming in at 13 terabytes. As a true image-based 4K master coming across the board, all the way down, and we compress that all the way down to a few megabits, as it's leaving the building. And what we have generally found, it depends whose name's on it. So if it's a Warner Brothers Blu-ray disc that's going out, they certainly want to come in and make decisions themselves and set their own encoding parameters. If it's, when we service a cable MVPD, they come in and they do their own settings, and they create their own code parameters. Our OTT providers, we certainly have a standard set, that, we've tested across a lot of different devices and we can stand behind, but everybody wants to fine tune by a couple of bits here or there. But again, then they're all coming to us and saying, how can we further enhance this to further reduce our bandwidth and save costs? And we're trying to now help them look at it on really getting into that business discussion. So I don't believe that any of our providers have all of their content viewed so much that it's worth compressing, doing an extra compression and optimization on every piece of content that they have. So how many times does something have to be viewed in order for it to be worthwhile to do the extra encoding optimization to save that amount on the public OTT environment or on the private? And then the larger the operator they are, the cheaper their CDN rate, so the more that kind of offsets what that cost break off is. But we're kind of playing with a number. You get to something that's viewed 4,000 to 5,000 times in an OTT environment, it's worth taking extra steps to compress it to save that 30% on it. Something that's a couple of hundred times or less than that number, it's probably not worth ever touching it. Let it keep passing through at its cheap basis. Old legacy content that's already on the system, except for maybe your animation or things that will be viewed again and again, or your Star Wars flicks, let it just sit there and continue to be in its environment. But that's where we're trying to take this. Not so it's the technology, it's then getting approvals for it, which most of the studios kind of say, hey, as long as you're doing the same thing with our content that you're doing it with everybody else, then it's pretty much okay. Right. But then it's ultimately down to the business of what do we want to do what to.
That's right. That's so amazing. I'm smiling. The 4,000 to 5,000 number, and you have no idea, because at least I've never discussed this number with you. That's exactly our analysis.
Really?
We found the break, is about 4,000 or 5,000 where there's ROI. And so, if you have any titles getting more than 4,000 or 5,000 plays, you optimize it. So, very, very interesting. So, moving this discussion along, there's always future codecs, right? There's better technology, and many of us in the room, and all of us up on the panel here are involved in various ways of even developing or testing or these technologies, whether that's VP9, whether that's HEVC, etc. It could be said, but what if we just hold out? Because in a couple years, and I'm not even going to name the codec, but fill in the blank is going to be here, and that's going to solve all of our problems. They promise 50%. How do you guys think about this in your respective businesses? Because I know very well what you're all doing. So you're both operating services, but you're at the same time responsible for looking to the future. So whoever wants to take it first, and I want to hear from all three of you. How do you handle this? The tension of, I have to operate a service today, but there are going to be better technologies in the future.
Well, we use it as one of our main selling points for why you want to, don't buy gear anymore. Go to a managed service provider like us, because tomorrow we'll implement the next technology and redo your library, and it's going to keep changing so often. But our customers are generally driven by that trade-off. They don't own the hardware at the end. They're not Apple. It's not their devices. That they're limited to what can be supported across as many devices as they want to go to. They're not interested in proprietary, that they've got to do multiple encodes for multiple types of devices. It's still bad enough they've got to package multiple times. Yeah. We're seeing our customers really stay with AVC with their HD content. And almost all of them are saying HEVC as we go into 4K, but we don't have a single person we're working with in direct streaming who's really looking at anything outside of those two options.
Yeah, and that's what we went with as well. We continued to do all of our HD and SD content in AVC, and then everything else, all our 4K HDR content now is in HEVC. That's where you see the big economies, right? Like of that side. I think one of the things that, back to Mark's question, was you can't just stop innovating. It's a really hard thing. Like if you stop, it's very hard to catch up. You fall behind in your workflow. You fall behind in the tools you're using, and you become complacent, right? And then getting caught up, and even if you miss a generation, it's very, very hard to catch up after that. Like, and you'll always be, you'll be struggling to catch up with whatever technology it is, and it ends up, not in your hands anymore. You could miss strategic opportunities and things like that.
I think change is permanent. No matter what, there will be better codecs, better systems available. You just like to add on to Sameer's point, you can't just stop. There's a couple of ways to peel the orange, especially for GoGo. One is increasing the bandwidth of the plane, which we're working on. The second way is decreasing the bit rate by not compromising the quality. Both go hand in hand. By doing so, either you provide the channel lineup exceeds what we provide today, so there's always spare capacity available, which we can let more channels to be added, or that utilization, that capacity could be used for something else, like the analytics on the plane, right? So how is the player performing? How's the user experience, the quality of experience? I would say today we're sort of inventing ways where we cut corners there and try to see. I think the user experience is good, but we need a little more of a handshake method. I think all those will really help the way the technology is progressing as well. And also to add to that, I think when you try to bring in the new codec, the challenge it puts on the computing platforms which we have, I think some of them are trying to out-innovate them as well. So it's a challenge for them. It's just not a challenge for GoGo, who's just who's a service provider. So I would say this is a race, and I think you got to stay in it and try to beat the market. So
absolutely, yeah. So, Prem, I would like your perspective in terms of user experience. There's different ways to measure it, and again, go back down the line, because I know Sameer, we've done work with you, even at MGO, a case study around rebuffering and things like that. But how do you measure user experience? What are the metrics that are most important to you at GoGo? When you're evaluating whether you're delivering what you want to or not, and then let's go down the.
Sure. The quality of service in terms of like choosing the right encoding platform and also the technology, AVC or HEVC. I think half the problem is solved there. Once you do that, I think you have the standard set of parameters, bitrate, drop frames, whatever be it, right? So I think we talked about the visual acuity, which is more important, and you could have all the quality of service parameters could be good, but then visually, it doesn't make sense, right? So I think I see Beamr is doing some work there. That's very important as well. But we use a mean observation scale, mass metric to measure based on different ingest points, within our network. And then because we have heterogeneous network, we do have handoff points, different satellite, right? And also there are certain nodes which diagnostically listen to these broadcast signals, come back, and then they will try to interpret pretty close to what happens on the plane. We don't have the last edge node to the device figured out, but we're working on that. That's the piece which I was suggesting, that we need a little more analytics and handshake in terms of like how it works. But yeah, the SSIS, all those are metrics which we make sure that we choose the right metric, and I think there's work to be done there. So.
Yeah, and on the TVOD side, it really is a lot. I mean, we use the average, standard metrics, average bit rate, drop frames. We also look at kind of the 95th percentile of what was used, like which layers we used the most in that regard. And then, then when we look at that, we try and look at who's using it, right? Which type of devices are using it more than others? Like, we definitely know that in the living room at home, like, this is where you're getting that, 5, 6 megabits, 7 megabits per second for HD, and well above 10 megabits per second for the UHD content. It's and then we try and figure out like how do we what can we do to implement different solutions, and there's a lot of other things we're looking at as well, like better last mile delivery, like switching CDNs on the fly, things like that, and then optimizing the video itself by category. Yep.
Sure. I mean, we have a number of golden eyes, in the facility that, depending on the type of work that we're doing for different customers, are helping to make decisions. But a lot of what we do, because it's not ultimately a Deluxe label on the product, it's our customers' labels on the name and brand. It's testing that generally they do and make those decisions and play in their own way. And I don't have a good sample set of exactly how they're going through and making those decisions. I assume very similar to what you guys are saying, where it is your name on it.
But would everyone basically agree that like rebuffering, in terms of metrics that you really would care a lot about, rebuffering and start time, stream start time is?
Yeah, I'm amazed how few of our customers actually have the ability to measure any of that. That they have no idea what their standard bit rates are out to their devices. They're a lot of them are locked into storefront platforms that don't offer, those types of analytics packages, and they're guessing, the customer complaints. So I think as they start to, as it becomes more prevalent, they'll start to have more of that data, and that'll drive back to making other decisions.
That's interesting. Yeah. How is the, I'm struck that both, Jeremy, and Prem, I know both of you are delivering live content, right? I mean, of course, VOD Deluxe is, but you're preparing live streams, correct? For your MVPD customers?
Not as much.
Not as much? Okay. But my question, and everybody participate, what is the difference, between VOD and live?
I'll go. So I think, just I was alluding in the beginning, I think live, the timeliness matters, right? So you got to get the content within a certain specified interval, otherwise it's useless, right? So but for VOD, I think efficiency matters. So you have you can get multiple passes at trying to encode the content so that it's efficient, right? And then it's got to fit the storage or whatever that need is, right? You get multiple passes at it, but here the live is like timeliness. So one platform, what you choose for encoding or decoding may not work the best way, or you may have to tweak the profiles. It's a different mindset in terms of tuning. Oftentimes, I hear my management say, that's a deployed. Like, no, we got to keep making better. And I think that's where our challenge is to go back and say, what we did for this airline or this customer is going to be a little different. And then, but to go back to your point, I think I think the timeliness is what lets us choose the encoding platform, or for that matter, the downstream processing. So.
Sure.
So I would talk to the difference between maybe live to VOD, quick turn content versus traditional VOD, and I would say there are, on traditional VOD content, there is more of that concern about efficiency and quality, and you have time to process it, and it's going to live on a system for an extended period of time. Live to VOD content it's how quickly you can get it out there, how much revenue you're going to get off the advertisements that are there, and we have different encode profiles and processing approaches to that different type of content, where getting content out there 2 hours earlier so that it could still be there in prime time to be watched on a VOD asset would be hugely important and negate potential savings that you would get on advanced encoding efficiency, whereas assets that are a studio asset that we've gotten 45 days ahead of time and have all the time in the world, it's going to live there for months if not years. Take the time, get it to the right quality standard, as compressed as possible. So I think we'll see that kind of trade-off.
Yeah. Is Fandango doing anything live?
No, just TVOD, and we have the same next day TV problem. So we do.
Yeah.
It's all about efficiency and getting it out. Yeah.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. Okay. So it's interesting. You mentioned that you use Moz in various points of your distribution path, PSNR, SSIM. Comment about quality metrics. How I'd be curious how you're using them in your respective workflows. Where you've found they work, where they don't. Some of this is well known, but it might be helpful for the audience to to hear how you're using those quality metrics.
We didn't design the mask score to troubleshoot some network-related problems. So sometimes it turns out that a 2% packet loss in a terrestrial network is okay, but for a live TV content, 2% packet loss is a huge, bad experience, right? But by using mask scores at different injection points, we were able to isolate, where could the problem be? Is it a handoff point at a teleport location where the satellite's content is being offloaded? That was one use case which we did not intend to, but the second use case which we really intended to was trying to get the feedback in terms of if it's broadcast to the planes and the signals are coming down, are we decoding it right? And how about the measurement in terms of drop frames or the temperature spikes which you could be seeing decoding those HEVC, because we do live transcoding on the plane for the 6 channels. So the temperature is also sort of a concern because we have a mini data center on the plane.
Can you comment what that CPU is? I mean, is that...
It's an Intel standard Intel architecture. We have a couple processors which has some GPUs utilized for transcoding.
That's right.
The GPU was not utilized for any of the processing, so we utilized it for transcoding. It's standard architecture, but just that it's in an aviation enclosure. That's what makes it a little different. But otherwise, it's comparable
T5s,
to
I assume.
T5s.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that.
So going back to the original question, I think the network problem is not something we intended to solve, but it solved it for us. But then the feedback in terms of what's the viewing experience on the plane collectively, it doesn't make sense if all the 100 nodes watching the device report a drop frame, right? It's going to correlate to a drop frame on the plane itself, right? So we built some modeling based on that by eliminating all those noisy chatters, which would come back and not give us any more information. We just congest the link, right?
Yeah.
So, but going back, I think that's where the mask score was really helpful in that aspect.
Samir, PSNR, SSIM, your experience?
Yeah, very similar in that regard. We've used, we rerun these PSNR and SSIM scores to calibrate the system for quality control, and basically we automate that process and then use it. And then we built some filters on top of it to figure out what's a normal set of issues that we're not going to look into. And when that threshold goes above something, then we'll actually have somebody actually go in and figure out hey, maybe it was a bad delivery from the studio, there was something wrong. Was there a bad encode that happens along the way? And we put somebody to fix that issue. So we use it more. We use it more as a threshold. We calibrated it, and then and we always kind of validate against it at multiple points. So we first run analysis on the file as soon as we get the MEDS file. We create a PSNR, the SSIM score, and then we validate it down the line after it gets encoded, and then after it gets delivered. And then we compare those values and see if it's within a given threshold.
Yeah, we only at this point use for calibration. The amount of content that we're processing through, upwards of about, in our group, 75,000 assets a month.
Yeah.
It would be a lot to run, that kind of detailed analysis on everyone. We for certain, we still have customers in the quality of content that we're dealing with where, our quality scores by that GoldenEye who, some of our content is, is viewed from start to end of every single asset, or manual 5-point QC check depending on the type of asset that goes through.
Yeah,
but we're not running that analysis on every asset.
Yeah, that's right. And in case someone's wondering, because probably a lot of people know that Beamr, that's what we invented, was a perceptual quality measure. We only use it inside our process, so that's why nobody's talking about it, because you don't have access to it. I would like to, it looks like we have about 7 minutes left. So if there are questions, the panel is happy to answer them. If there aren't, I have more prepared. So I'm going to break here and ask, are there any questions? Yes?
You mentioned that you set a threshold for PSNR is kind of linear, so it's pretty easy. How do you set the threshold for SSIM? Because it's a highly non-VDMS, so acoustic content and acoustic different databases should be differentiated.
Yeah, it varies a lot, obviously. I mean, PSNR is our main focus. SSIM is more of an additional layer mainly for our high quality content that we get into. We have specific profiles where we're looking exactly at the SSIM threshold and ratings, but it's more of an indicator. We use it more of an indicator than anything else. But as you said, PSNR is more linear, easier to calibrate and have a threshold with. Yeah.
And it's not always really closely correlated to human vision.
Exactly.
Either, so,
yeah.
Yes.
Can I ask you to sort of take a 5-year view on the bandwidth versus compression trade-off? I mean, Prem, you mentioned you just get a faster connection to the plane, and the bandwidth is getting faster and cheaper, and storage is getting cheaper. So is this a problem this year, in 2 years, or in 5 years? Is this going to be bright, shiny future, and bandwidth will be too cheap to meter, and nobody will care about it?
So, we started 10 years back, right? So just going back and GoGo, our first service, which was a North America-based service, we just had 3 meg to the plane, right? And fast forward, 10 years, and now we're able to do 100 meg to the plane. So if you look at the bandwidth curve, right? So we were pretty flat until like last year, and then like a hockey stick, there was technological improvements which has helped us get there, right? So we're sort of following the same path as any terrestrial network. I think terrestrial network, be it a cable modem or any other technology, they follow the same path. So to answer your question, yeah, there will be more choices, and bandwidth is just going to become cheaper. But again, I found that we find a way to fill that pipe up, right? So there's always some application, and there's some device which is coming up, which will fill it up. So I guess you got to innovate on both sides. That's my point. So.
Yeah, we're seeing more, 2018 being the year of 4K, for a lot of our operators, and right now the internet's great for HD, but you got to use every trick that you can to start getting, those 4K streams that are compressed enough to get down there and start to have mass deployment. So, again, maybe 5 years. I don't know if we're going to be 8K, 16K, but at least for 4K right now, compression is absolutely key.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? Yes.
So, Prem, in an airplane, can you give us an idea of the traits that you're delivering to devices, and establish some sort of management or caps, something like that, device is offering 4K to actually allow it to stream? How does that management work?
So most of the passengers, what devices they carry is like an iPad, right? So 4K doesn't make sense. I mean, based on the distance you have, in the cabin, because you're sort of constrained by the seat, inter-seat distance, right? So 4K doesn't make sense in that application, right? But we use SD content, and that's pretty, that's pretty good. Like depending on what the profile is, we've gone as high as 640p, and the viewing experience has been pretty good, just using that 640p content. So. Yes, yeah, to the tablets.
Okay, we have time for one more question, I believe. No? Okay. Well, join me in thanking the panel. This was really a wonderful discussion, and thank you.